The sky was full of gray clouds, and the cold air showed that a storm was coming. Far from the cities in the middle of nature, a young man named Ryan sat in the front seat of a Jeep, watching the snow-covered trees fly by. Ryan was different. At 27 years old, he spent all his money traveling, and even though people called him silly, he never regretted it. This time, he was on a road trip with 3 friends, Mason, Tyler, and Jake. They had been driving for hours on winding roads with no people or homes around. It was beautiful, but dangerous, especially with the bad weather. The others looked at each other, surprised. They were in the middle of nowhere. There were no gas stations for miles, and turning back wasn't an option now. Mason said they should stop for the night. It was too risky to walk in the storm. As they settled down, it got quiet. The only sounds were the wind and the fire cracking. But later, after midnight, Jake suddenly sat up and asked if anyone had heard something. Ryan opened his eyes and asked what he meant. Jake whispered that he had heard a scream or a cry coming from the woods. Everyone listened, and a few seconds later, they heard it again. It was a deep, painful sound. It wasn't human or a machine. It was pure pain. Tyler tried to be brave and said it was probably the wind. But Ryan didn't think so. He had been in forests before. He had heard animals in pain, but this was different. It sounded desperate, like someone needed help. Ryan decided they couldn't ignore it. He stood up, grabbed his flashlight, and said something was out there, suffering. The others weren't sure. The storm was still strong, and it wasn't safe to walk into the wild at night. But Ryan had already made up his mind. He wrapped his coat around himself, checked his flashlight, and started walking toward the sound. So, Ryan went into the storm alone. What he would find there was something none of them could have imagined. Ryan pushed through the wind and snow, each step sinking into the cold ground. His flashlight flickered in the darkness, showing him only a few feet ahead. The cry came again, closer this time. It was louder and heavier, almost like a moan filled with fear and pain. Branches scratched his arms as he moved through the thick forest. The storm howled above him, but Ryan stayed focused. He didn't know what kind of animal was making that sound, but something inside him wouldn't let him turn back. And then he saw it. Just past a fallen tree, under some low branches, a large shape was moving. Ryan crouched and moved carefully. As he got closer, his breath caught in his throat. It was a bear. A big, female bear, covered in snow and mud, was lying on her side. Her body shook, and she let out another painful cry. Ryan saw blood in the snow. The bear was giving birth, but something was wrong. For a moment, Ryan froze. This was a wild animal. Huge, powerful, and dangerous. One wrong move and she could kill him with a swipe. But she wasn't attacking. She was weak, tired, and scared. Ryan stepped forward slowly. He whispered, "Hey, I'm not going to hurt you," even though he knew she couldn't understand him. The bear turned her head slowly, but didn't move away. Her breathing was fast, and her eyes, dark and filled with pain, met his for a brief second. Ryan had never felt anything like it. It was like the animal was asking for help. He looked around. There were no sharp tools, just snow, branches, and his hands. Ryan had read about animal births in his travels. He knew that sometimes the baby could get stuck, making it dangerous for both the mother and the cub. It looked like that was happening now. Swallowing his fear, he moved beside her. The bear let out a soft growl, but it wasn't angry. It sounded more like a warning, or maybe fear. Ryan stayed calm, speaking gently. Slowly, he placed his hand near the lower part of her belly. What Ryan felt shocked him. The cub was halfway out, but stuck. The mother bear had no more strength to push. Ryan took off his jacket, wrapped it around his hands, and with all the care he could muster, he helped pull the cub out. It took time, effort, and trembling hands, but after a few painful minutes, the cub slipped free and landed softly in the snow. The mother bear weakly lifted her head, sniffing her newborn. The cub remained still, not breathing. Ryan quickly wiped the cub's face and rubbed its tiny body, trying to create warmth and movement. He had seen vets do something similar during a wildlife rescue documentary. His hands shook from the cold and fear, but he kept rubbing. Then, a soft sound. The cub coughed, twitched, and let out a weak cry. The mother bear gave a low, soft growl, almost like a sigh. She licked her cub gently, pulling it close to her body. Ryan sat back, his heart pounding. He had just helped a wild bear give birth and saved the life of her cub. But before he could stand, something else happened. Something shocking. Ryan looked around. The snow was still falling, but something felt different. The forest was quieter. That's when he heard it. Footsteps. Not paws, boots. Ryan turned, and through the trees a figure appeared. A man, dressed in a thick forest ranger uniform, stepped into the small clearing and asked how Ryan had found this place. Ryan quickly stood up and asked who the man was. The man introduced himself as Daniel and explained he was a wildlife ranger. He had been watching the bear for weeks because she was rare, an endangered species. He had been tracking her, but the storm had separated them. Ryan looked down at the mother and her cub, knowing that the bear had almost died. Daniel walked over slowly, careful not to disturb the animals, and asked if Ryan had helped the bear. Ryan nodded. Daniel took out a small radio and spoke quickly into it. Within minutes, 2 more rangers appeared, carrying equipment, blankets, and medical supplies. They began checking the bear and her cub carefully, maintaining a safe distance. One of the rangers turned to Daniel and said they were both okay, thanks to Ryan. Daniel looked at Ryan again and told him he had no idea what he had done. Ryan asked what Daniel meant. Daniel explained that the bear was the last female of her kind in the entire region. They had feared she might die in the wild during birth, but now, thanks to Ryan, there was hope for the species. Ryan stayed silent, trying to understand. He had come on a trip, just another adventure. He never expected to be part of something so important. As the rangers continued working, Daniel pulled out his phone and said people needed to know about this. Ryan had just saved 2 lives and possibly the future of this animal. Ryan smiled softly. Fame didn't matter to him, but he felt something deep inside, a quiet pride. The storm began to ease, the wind softer now, and the first light of morning touched the trees. Ryan turned and started walking back to the jeep where his friends were waiting. Behind him, the mother bear curled around her cub, alive and safe. The forest, once full of pain and storm, now held something rare: hope. Back at the jeep, Ryan's friends stared at him in silence, soaked, shivering, eyes wide, but smiling. Jason breathed out, amazed, and Taylor wiped his eyes, saying Ryan should have been dead. Ryan shrugged, half laughing, half dreaming. He said, "But I'm not, and neither is she." And with that, they drove away, slowly, respectfully, as if the forest itself had become sacred ground. There were no buildings, no fences, just one bronze statue standing beneath the trees. A mother bear, head bowed, nuzzling her cub. Beneath it, a single line carved into stone. In the storm, he saw life, and he chose to protect it.